You've been working on yourself for years now. Therapy appointments every week, self-help books stacked on your nightstand, affirmations repeated every morning. You understand your triggers, you know your attachment style, and you can name your trauma. Progress happens sometimes, but something always pulls you back to square one. The same relationship problems keep showing up with different people. That crushing feeling of inadequacy returns no matter how much you achieve. Intimacy still makes your chest tighten with unexplained panic. You know all the psychological terms, but knowing doesn't seem to change anything fundamental. Everyone tells you the solution is obvious. Forgive your mother for what she did or didn't do. Make peace with your childhood. Let go of the past and move forward. But you've tried that approach already, and the relief never lasts beyond a few weeks. The invisible prison? What if the real problem isn't the woman who raised you? What if the person blocking your healing lies somewhere you haven't been looking? The truth is simpler and stranger than most therapy approaches acknowledge. Your actual mother exists in the physical world, whatever your current relationship with her looks like. But another version of her exists inside your mind, built from fragments of memory, emotion, and childhood interpretation. This internal version operates independently from the real person. She speaks through the critical voice in your head. She peers in your reactions to criticism. She guides your choices about relationships, success, and self-worth. Most people spend decades fighting external battles, while this internal figure quietly runs the show. Understanding this distinction changes everything about your healing journey. The work ahead isn't about confronting the woman who raised you. The work is about recognizing the psychological imprint she left behind and learning how it still shapes your behavior today. It's the archetype that controls you. Carl Jung dedicated his life to understanding how the human mind actually works beneath conscious awareness. His research revealed something most people never consider. Your earliest experiences created psychological structures that continue operating long after those experiences ended. Jung identified something he called the mother complex. This isn't about your actual parent or your childhood memories. It's a framework your brain constructed during the first years of life when you were learning fundamental lessons about existence. Each person builds this framework differently depending on what they experienced. Maybe you learned that affection arrived only when you behaved perfectly. Perhaps you discovered that showing vulnerability led to punishment or neglect. Some children absorb beliefs that their feelings are burdensome, that setting limits is wrong, that wanting things for themselves is unacceptable. These early conclusions don't disappear when you grow up. They become the lens through which you interpret every situation you encounter. Someone gives you constructive feedback at work, and suddenly you're drowning in shame that feels disproportionate to the moment. A friend takes longer than usual to text back, and panic floods your body like you're being left behind forever. That harsh voice inside your head didn't appear last week. The one insisting you should shrink yourself, prove your worth constantly, accommodate everyone else, and never burden anyone with your needs. This voice has been speaking since you were learning language, repeating lessons so old they feel like fundamental truth rather than learned behavior. Every relationship you enter gets filtered through this psychological framework. You unconsciously expect lovers to repair damage they had nothing to do with creating. You assign meanings to normal human behavior based on old wounds rather than present reality. When people act like regular imperfect humans instead of perfect healers, the ancient pain surfaces again. The cycle continues because you're responding to something invisible. An internal structure keeps running the same program, generating the same results, keeping you trapped in familiar suffering. The loyalty that keeps you stuck, something strange happens when people get close to real transformation. Right at the edge of breakthrough, they sabotage themselves. Bert Hellinger spent years researching family dynamics and uncovered a pattern that explains this phenomenon. Children form bonds with their parents that go deeper than conscious awareness. These bonds include unspoken rules about how much happiness, success, and freedom each person is allowed to experience. Breaking these rules feels dangerous, even when nobody actually enforces them anymore. You learned early on that matching your mother's emotional state kept you connected to her. When she withdrew into sadness, you became quiet and careful around her. When she seemed overwhelmed, you made yourself smaller and less demanding. These adaptations helped you survive childhood by maintaining the relationship you depended on. But those childhood strategies didn't stop when you grew up, became automatic responses wired so deeply you don't notice them operating. Now, when good things happen, discomfort rises up to meet them. Success feels wrong somehow. Happiness triggers anxiety. Stepping into a bigger life activates guilt that seems to come from nowhere. This guilt serves a purpose you established decades ago. Somewhere inside, you still believe that having more than your mother had means abandoning her. Experiencing joy she never felt seems like a form of cruelty. Building the life you want looks like proof you don't care about where you came from. So you hold yourself back in ways that seem completely irrational. You quit jobs right before promotions. You end relationships just when they get serious. You start projects with enthusiasm and then let them die quietly. Each time, you're protecting that old bond, proving you haven't forgotten her struggles by refusing to move beyond them. The problem is simple. You're living her unlived life instead of your own. You're choosing limitation as loyalty when nobody actually asked you to make that choice. The patterns you can't break. The mother complex doesn't just sit quietly in your unconscious doing nothing. It actively runs your daily life through patterns you probably don't even recognize as patterns anymore. You just feel like who you are. You apologize constantly for taking up space, for having needs, for existing in ways that might inconvenience anyone. You check your words 3 times before speaking in meetings because the fear of saying something wrong paralyzes you. You agree to things you don't want to do because saying no feels impossible. These behaviors didn't develop randomly. Each one traces back to lessons learned when your brain was forming its understanding of how relationships work. Maybe you learned that being helpful was the only way to earn attention. Perhaps you discovered that expressing disagreement led to coldness or anger. Possibly you absorbed the idea that your value depended entirely on how useful you made yourself to others. The patterns show up most clearly in intimate relationships. You choose partners who feel emotionally unavailable, then work endlessly trying to earn their affection. Or you pick people who need fixing, believing that if you save them, they'll finally see your worth. When relationships start feeling too close and stable, panic sets in, and you create distance through fights or withdrawal. Criticism from anyone lands like a catastrophe rather than simple feedback. Someone's bad mood feels like proof you did something terrible. When people need space, you interpret it as rejection and abandonment. Your reactions are always bigger than the situation's warrant because you're not responding to what's actually happening now. You're responding to what happened then. Every current interaction gets filtered through that old framework, activating feelings that belong to a child who needed something she never consistently received. The present moment triggers the past, and you can't tell the difference between the two anymore. The voice inside your head, stop for a moment and listen to how you talk to yourself internally. What does that voice say when something goes wrong? What tone does it use when you're evaluating your performance or appearance or choices? Most people never question this internal dialogue. They assume these thoughts represent their genuine assessment of situations. But that assumption deserves closer examination, because the voice inside your head might not actually belong to you. Think about the specific criticisms you hear repeatedly. You're too much. You're not enough. You should try harder. You're being ridiculous. Stop making everything about yourself. Nobody wants to hear your problems. Get over it already. These aren't neutral observations. They're judgments delivered with a particular emotional weight. And if you pay careful attention, you'll notice they sound remarkably similar to messages you absorbed during childhood, even if the exact words have changed. Your brain recorded thousands of interactions during your developmental years, how people responded when you cried. What happened when you asked for help? The reactions you got for being excited, angry, scared, or needy. All of that data got processed into general rules about how to navigate the world. Those rules now operate as your internal guidance system. But the system is outdated, built for circumstances that no longer exist. A child who needed to monitor every facial expression and modify behavior constantly to maintain connection doesn't need those survival skills anymore. Yet the monitoring continues automatically. You walk through your adult life with a committee in your head, evaluating every action and finding most of them inadequate. This committee doesn't represent wisdom or truth. It represents adaptation to an environment you no longer live in. The transformation begins when you can hear this voice and recognize it as learned programming rather than reality. You don't have to believe everything your mind tells you. You can observe the thoughts, acknowledge their source, and choose whether they deserve your attention. Why you sabotage your own success? Notice the timing of when things fall apart in your life. You're weeks away from finishing a major project, and suddenly you lose all momentum. A relationship finally feels stable and secure, then you create conflict out of nowhere. Career advancement is within reach, and you make uncharacteristic mistakes that cost you the opportunity. This pattern repeats so consistently that it stops looking like coincidence. Something inside you actively dismantles progress right before breakthrough moments arrive. The dismantling doesn't announce itself clearly, disguises itself as forgetfulness, exhaustion, rational concerns, or justified reactions to minor problems. Your conscious mind genuinely wants the good things you're pursuing. You've worked toward these goals for months or years, yet another part of you, operating far below conscious thought, treats progress as a threat that must be neutralized. The threat isn't logical. Nobody will actually punish you for succeeding. But your nervous system doesn't operate on logic. It operates on patterns established when you were learning what kept relationships intact and what risked losing them. If the primary relationship in your early life involved someone who struggled, your system may have concluded that struggling alongside her maintained the connection. Thriving while she suffered looked like betrayal or abandonment, so you learned to regulate your own success to match the emotional ceiling established in that relationship. Years later, you're still living within that ceiling, even though the person who set it may not care anymore whether you exceed it. The limitation exists purely in your internal wiring now, activated automatically whenever you approach the boundary. You don't consciously choose to stay small. Your system chooses it for you, using whatever methods work to pull you back from the edge of transformation. Understanding this mechanism doesn't instantly dissolve it, but recognition is where change becomes possible. Reparenting yourself the way forward doesn't involve fixing your relationship with your mother or getting her to acknowledge what happened. The path requires something most people never consider. You must learn to provide for yourself what wasn't consistently available during your formative years. Reparenting yourself means developing the capacity to recognize and respond to your own emotional needs without depending on external sources. This sounds simple until you try it and realize how foreign the concept feels. Begin by noticing when difficult emotions emerge during your day. Instead of immediately trying to make them disappear, practice staying present with them. Observe where you feel anxiety in your body. Notice what thoughts accompany sadness. Track what situations trigger shame or anger most reliably. Then experiment with responding differently than your default pattern. If you usually criticize yourself for struggling, try speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to a friend going through something hard. If you typically ignore your feelings until they become overwhelming, try acknowledging them when they first appear. This takes consistent effort because your automatic responses are deeply ingrained. You've spent years treating yourself with the same harshness or neglect you experienced early on. Changing that pattern requires catching yourself in the moment and deliberately choosing a different response. Practice asking yourself direct questions about what you need, not what you should need or what would be most convenient for everyone else. What you actually need to feel steady, safe, and supported right now. Sometimes the answer will be rest when you've been taught to push through exhaustion. Sometimes it will be saying no when you've learned that refusing requests makes you selfish. Sometimes it will be asking for help when you were raised to believe that needing assistance equals weakness. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is gradually building an internal environment where you can trust yourself to show up for your own well-being. This internal stability changes how you relate to everyone around you because you stop requiring them to compensate for what you are not giving yourself. Meeting the wounded child within somewhere inside you, a younger version of yourself still exists. Not as a memory exactly, but as a living presence carrying all the confusion, fear, and unmet needs from your earliest years. This isn't a metaphor or therapeutic fiction. Your nervous system holds imprints of experiences that shaped how you learned to survive. That child made sense of the world with limited information and immature cognitive abilities. She drew conclusions about herself based on how adults responded to her. When care was inconsistent, she decided she must be unlovable. When emotions were dismissed, she learned her feelings were wrong or excessive. When needs went unmet, she concluded that wanting things made her bad. These conclusions weren't accurate, but they became the foundation for her developing sense of self. She carried them forward into every subsequent stage of development because nobody helped her understand that the problem was on her. The problem was an environment that couldn't provide what she required. Now, you're an adult with responsibilities, accomplishments, and sophisticated ways of understanding human behavior. But that child still operates inside you, activated whenever present situations resemble past wounds. Someone's tone of voice, a particular facial expression, or the feeling of being overlooked can instantly transport you back to that young state. When this happens, you're not overreacting to current events. You're responding to accumulated pain that never got properly addressed. The child inside you is trying to communicate something important about what she needed then and what you still need now. Meeting her requires slowing down enough to recognize when she's been activated. Instead of judging yourself for feeling disproportionate emotions, try approaching those feelings with curiosity. What does this remind you of? How old do you feel right now? What did the younger you need in moments like this that she didn't receive? This conversation with yourself might feel strange initially, but it opens a pathway to healing that analyzing your problems intellectually never quite reaches. The choice to stop being loyal to pain, you don't need to wait for anything external to change before you can heal. Your mother doesn't need to apologize or acknowledge what happened. She doesn't need to transform into the parent you wish you'd had. Your healing belongs entirely to you now, independent of her participation or understanding. This realization often brings grief before it brings relief. You may have spent years hoping that one day she would finally see you clearly, validate your experience, and make everything right. Releasing that hope means accepting that the resolution you wanted from her will never arrive in the form you imagined. But accepting this reality also liberates you from waiting. You're no longer a child dependent on someone else's emotional capacity. You can choose to stop organizing your life around wounds that were inflicted decades ago by someone who was probably doing the best she could with her own limitations. The choice shows up in small moments throughout your day. When guilt appears after you've said no to a request, you can pause and question whether that guilt serves you. When you catch yourself shrinking to avoid making others uncomfortable, you can ask whose comfort you're actually protecting. When familiar patterns start pulling you backward, you can recognize them and consciously select a different response. These choices accumulate over time. Each one represents a tiny rebellion against the old programming that insisted you had to remain loyal to struggle in order to maintain connection. Each one proves you can survive making decisions based on what serves your growth rather than what preserves old dynamics. Change doesn't require a single dramatic moment where everything shifts permanently. Change happens through thousands of small decisions to prioritize your well-being over inherited obligations. The transformation is gradual, almost imperceptible day to day, but profound when you look back months or years later. Reclaiming your power freedom doesn't mean pain disappears completely from your life. It means pain stops controlling every decision you make. You take back authority over your choices, instead of letting old programming run the show automatically. This shift allows you to experience good things without guilt attached to them. Joy doesn't require permission or justification anymore. You can feel happy without immediately searching for reasons why you don't deserve it. Your value stops depending on whether other people approve of you. Their opinions might provide useful information sometimes, but they don't determine your fundamental worth. You can accept yourself regardless of external validation. Receiving care from others becomes simpler. You don't have to keep score or brace yourself for the moment they'll weaponize your vulnerability. You can give care without exhausting yourself or expecting payment for every kindness offered. Boundaries transform from aggressive barriers into necessary structures. Setting limits protects your capacity to stay present and engaged. Clear boundaries create conditions where real connection can actually develop. This is what happens when you stop following rules designed for a child navigating circumstances she couldn't control. You operate from conscious choice instead of automatic reaction. You respond to what's actually happening now instead of what happened decades ago. You build a life reflecting who you truly are. The mother within you. You don't need to cut your mother out of your life to heal from these patterns, but you do need to change her position in your internal world. Stop waiting for her to become someone different. Start showing up differently for yourself instead. The nurturing presence you've been searching for externally already exists within you. You can provide the acceptance, understanding, and support you once needed from her. This isn't about pretending the past didn't happen or excusing what went wrong. It's about recognizing that you now possess the capacity to meet your own needs. When you integrate this understanding consciously, you stop requiring her to be perfect before you can feel whole. You can relate to her as she actually is, rather than who you desperately needed her to be. This is where transformation completes itself. You're no longer controlled by unconscious patterns. You're no longer waiting for external rescue. You've taken authorship of your own story. That changes absolutely everything.